The CPS caseworker sat on my couch like she owned the place. Her clipboard rested on her knee, pen ready. I stood across from her, hands shoved in my pockets so she wouldn't see them shaking. "Mr. Gray," she said, flipping through her notes, "can you explain why a neighbor reported that your daughter appears neglected and afraid?" My jaw tightened. I could feel Blue listening from a room down the hall. The door was cracked just enough for her to hear everything. "That's not true," I said quietly. "Someone called our hotline," the caseworker continued. "They said your daughter looks scared, that you've been acting unstable, hostile." I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch a hole through the wall. But I didn't. I just stood there, swallowing the rage, because that's what I always did. "Who called?" I asked. It was anonymous. But I already knew. I knew exactly who made that call, and I knew it was a lie. The caseworker glanced toward Blue's room. "I'll need to speak with her alone." My chest tightened. This was my daughter, my kid, and some stranger was about to ask her questions because a liar next door decided to destroy our lives? I nodded. "She's in her room." As the caseworker walked down the hall, I stood frozen in my living room. My fists were clenched so hard my knuckles turned white. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know if staying quiet was the right choice anymore. But how did it get this bad? How does a hard-working single dad end up with CPS at his door? It all started 3 months ago. In a small Texas neighborhood where the air smelled like dust and old concrete, I worked as an HVAC technician for a company called Cool Front Air Systems. I fixed air conditioners in the summer heat, crawled through attics, and came home covered in sweat and insulation. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I lived in a rental duplex with my daughter, Blue. She was 13, quiet, and way too smart for her age. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it mattered. She loved to draw, sketches of birds, trees, people she saw at the park. Her room was covered in them. I'd been raising her alone since she was 4. Her mother left one morning and never came back. No note, no goodbye, just gone. At first, it was hard. I didn't know how to braid hair or pick out the right clothes for picture day. But I learned. I figured it out. I had to. Now, Blue is in 8th grade. She got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and never asked for much. I worked long hours, but I always made time for her. Breakfast together before school, dinner at the table, no phones, homework help when she needed it. Our duplex wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, a small yard with patchy grass. But it was ours. It was safe. Life wasn't perfect. Money was tight. The AC in our place barely worked, which was ironic considering what I did for a living. Blue's school supplies cost more every year. I picked up extra shifts when I could. But we had a routine. We had each other, and that was enough. On weekends, we'd go to the park. Blue would sketch while I read the news on my phone. Sometimes we'd get tacos from the food truck on the corner. She'd tell me about her art class or some drama at school. I'd tell her about the weird places I had to fix air conditioners. Mansions, warehouses, one time even a funeral home. She always laughed at that one. "Dad, that's creepy." I'd reply, "It paid for those tacos." Those were good days, simple days. Then Mason Lark moved in next door. I first noticed him on a Saturday morning. A moving truck pulled up, and a guy in his 30s stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and a polo shirt that looked too expensive for manual labor. He had that cocky walk, shoulders back, chin up, like he owned the block. I was outside watering the plants. Mason glanced over and gave a tight smile. "Morning." "Morning," I replied. That was it. Nothing strange, just a new neighbor. But something about Mason felt off. The way he looked at people, the way he talked down to the movers, the way he smirked when he caught me glancing his way. I shrugged it off. I had enough on my plate without worrying about some rich guy next door. A few weeks passed. Life went on. I worked. Blue went to school. Everything was normal. Mason kept to himself mostly. I'd see him leaving for work in expensive suits, coming home late. His place was way nicer than ours. He'd renovated it, added modern lights, a fancy security camera. He drove a black BMW. I drove a 10-year-old Ford truck with a broken AC. We didn't talk much, just the occasional nod when we crossed paths. But I started noticing little things. Like how Mason would stand on his porch sometimes, just watching, not doing anything, just standing there with his phone, looking around. Or how he'd time his exits perfectly to when Blue was walking to the bus stop. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was just a guy who lived next door. Maybe he was awkward. Maybe he didn't know how to be neighborly. But my gut kept telling me something was wrong. One evening, I was grabbing the mail when Mason pulled up in his car. He stepped out, keys jingling, and walked toward his front door. Then he paused, looked over at me. "Your daughter, huh? She's growing up fast," Mason said casually. I froze. "Real pretty kid," Mason added. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands tightened around the stack of mail.
"Don't talk about my daughter," I said, my voice low and steady. Mason raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, man. I'm just saying. She seems like a good kid." "Stay away from her." Mason's smile didn't fade. "You should really work on that temper, Alexander." He turned and walked into his house, whistling. I stood there, jaw clenched, heart pounding. My instincts screamed at me. Something was wrong with Mason. Something dangerous. But what could I do? The guy hadn't technically done anything illegal, just creepy comments. Veiled threats. That night I sat Blue down in the kitchen. "If that guy next door ever talks to you," I said carefully, "you come straight inside and tell me, okay?" Blue looked up from her sketchbook. "Okay, Dad." "I'm serious, Blue. Don't talk to him. Don't be polite. Just walk away." She nodded, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "No, I just want you to be safe." But deep down I knew Mason wasn't done. And I had no idea how bad things were about to get. 2 weeks later, I got a call at work. I was on a roof in the middle of July replacing a compressor unit when my phone buzzed. The number was my landlord. "Hey, Tom," I answered, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Alex, we need to talk." Tom's voice was tight, uncomfortable. "What's up?" "I got a complaint about you." I froze. "A complaint? From who?" "Your neighbor, Mason Lark. He says you've been harassing him, following him around, staring at him through the windows." My blood went cold. "That's not true." "He seemed pretty serious, Alex. Said he's uncomfortable living next to you." "Tom, I've been working 12-hour days. I barely see the guy. This is—" "Look, I'm not accusing you of anything," Tom interrupted. "But I have to take complaints seriously. Just keep the peace, all right? I don't want any trouble." The line went dead. I stood on that roof, staring at my phone, feeling like the ground had just disappeared beneath me. Mason was lying, blatantly lying, and people were believing him. I finished the job in a daze. My hands moved on autopilot, tightening bolts, checking refrigerant levels, testing the thermostat. But my mind was somewhere else. Why would Mason do this? What did he want? I replayed every interaction we'd had, every word, every look. And then it hit me. He wasn't just being creepy. He was setting me up. The next day I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA. "Dear Mr. Gray, we have received multiple complaints regarding hostile and inappropriate behavior toward a fellow resident. This is your official warning. Any further incidents may result in fines or removal from the property. I read it 3 times. My hands shook. Multiple complaints? I hadn't done anything. I marched over to Mason's door and knocked hard. Mason opened it, looking calm, almost amused. "Can I help you?" Mason asked. "What the hell are you doing? Why are you lying about me?" Mason leaned against the doorframe. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You filed complaints with my landlord, with the HOA." Mason shrugged. "I told them the truth. You've been acting weird, watching me. It's creepy, man." "That's a lie." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who looks unstable right now." I felt the rage building in my chest. My fists clenched. But I didn't move. I didn't yell. I just stared at Mason, trying to figure out what game he was playing. "Stay away from my daughter," I said quietly.
Mason's grin widened. "You should really get some help, Alexander. Anger issues like that? Not good for a single dad." He closed the door. I stood there, shaking, feeling like I'd just lost a fight I didn't even know I was in. That night, my boss called. "Alex, I need to ask you something," my boss said. "Did you threaten someone?" My stomach dropped. "What? No! Who said that?" "Some guy called the office today, said you work here, said you threatened him at home. He sounded scared, Alex." "That's not true. I didn't—" "Look, I'm not saying I believe him, but I have to document this. Corporate policy. If he files a police report, we'll have to take it seriously." I felt the walls closing in. "I didn't threaten anyone," I said again. "Just keep your head down, all right? We can't afford bad press right now. You understand?" The call ended. I sat in my truck outside work, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying not to scream. Mason was destroying me, piece by piece, lie by lie, and no one would listen to the truth. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? My neighbor is lying about me? They'd probably think I was paranoid. I thought about talking to other neighbors, but Mason had already poisoned the well. If I started knocking on doors, it would just make me look more unstable. I was trapped. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out how to fight back. But every path led to the same place, my word against his. And his word had money behind it. 3 days later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw a woman in business casual holding a badge. "Mr. Gray? I'm with Child Protective Services. I received an anonymous report that your daughter may be in an unsafe environment. I need to come in and ask you a few questions." My heart stopped. "This is a mistake." "It's just a standard check, Mr. Gray. May I come in?" I stepped aside. What else could I do? The caseworker walked through the house, clipboard in hand, scanning everything. She looked at the dishes in the sink, the laundry basket in the corner, Blue's backpack by the door. She asked about Blue's school, her friends, her health. She asked if I ever lost my temper, if Blue ever seemed afraid of me. "No," I said, my voice tight. "She's not afraid of me. She's my daughter. I take care of her." The caseworker nodded, writing notes. Then she opened the fridge, checked the expiration dates on the milk and eggs, looked in the pantry. "Does Blue have her own room?" "Yes, down the hall." "May I see it?" I led her to Blue's room. The walls were covered in drawings. Her bed was made. Her desk was cluttered with colored pencils and sketchbooks. The caseworker picked up one of the drawings. It was a picture of me and Blue at the park. "She's talented," the caseworker said. "Yeah, she is." She set the drawing down and made more notes.
Then she asked to speak to Blue alone. I stood in the hallway, fists clenched, while the caseworker sat in Blue's room asking her questions I couldn't hear. Every second felt like an hour. I could hear their voices through the door, low, calm, but I couldn't make out the words. Finally, the door opened. Blue walked out, eyes red. The caseworker followed. "Everything seems fine for now, Mr. Gray, but we'll be monitoring the situation. If we receive any further reports, we'll have to conduct a more thorough investigation." She handed me a card. "If you have any questions, you can reach me at this number." The door closed. I stood there, staring at nothing. Blue walked over and sat on the couch. She didn't say anything, just stared at her hands. I sat down next to her. "What did she ask you?" "If I felt safe, if you ever yelled at me, if I had enough food." Blue's voice was small. "Dad, what's happening?"
I pulled her into a hug. "Nothing, kiddo. It's just a misunderstanding." But it wasn't, and I knew it. Mason had called CPS. I was sure of it, and now the state was watching me, waiting for me to mess up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over to Mason's house and drag him into the street. But I didn't, because if I did, I'd lose Blue. So I sat there, silent, swallowing the rage. And I wondered how much longer I could keep doing this. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Mason had crossed a line. He wasn't just messing with me anymore, he was going after Blue. And that changed everything. I thought about every option, every possible way to fight back. But they all ended the same way, me looking guilty. If I confronted him again, he'd call the cops and say I threatened him. If I tried to expose him, he'd twist it around and make me look obsessed. If I did nothing, he'd keep escalating. I was stuck. And Mason knew it. By the end of the week, my life had become a nightmare. A post appeared on the neighborhood Facebook group. Anonymous, vague, but clearly about me. "Just a heads up to parents in the area. There's been some concerning behavior from a neighbor. Keep your kids close. Stay safe." I read it on my phone during my lunch break. My stomach dropped. The comments started rolling in. "Where? Who? PM me details." Someone replied, "I think it's the guy in the duplex on Elm, the one with the teenage daughter." My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. People I'd known for years started avoiding me. Parents pulled their kids away when Blue walked by. At the grocery store, a woman I used to chat with crossed the street to avoid me. I felt invisible walls going up around me. I was being erased, one lie at a time. At work, my coworkers started treating me differently. Whispers stopped when I walked into the break room. My boss stopped assigning me certain jobs, the ones at schools, daycares, places where background checks mattered. "Just until this blows over," my boss said. But it wasn't blowing over. It was getting worse. One afternoon, I came home and found Blue sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. "What's wrong?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Someone sent me a screenshot." She handed me her phone. It was the Facebook post. Someone had shared it in a group chat with kids from Blue's school. One comment said, "Isn't that Blue Gray's dad?" Another said, "Yikes." I felt my chest tighten.
Blue, they think you're dangerous, she whispered. I'm not. I know. Her voice cracked. But they don't. She stood up and walked to her room. The door closed softly behind her. I sat on the couch staring at the screenshot. Mason had taken everything. My reputation, my job security, my peace of mind. And now, he was taking Blue's childhood. That night, I tried to report the post to Facebook, but it didn't violate their community standards. It was vague enough to stay up. I thought about posting my own response, defending myself, but anything I said would just make me look more guilty. So I did nothing.
And the post stayed up. The next day, I got a call from Blue's school. Mr. Gray, this is Principal Kendall. We need to discuss something. My heart sank. What's going on? We've received some concerns from other parents about Blue's home environment. What concerns? I can't share specifics, but I wanted to let you know that we're required to report certain things to CPS if we have reason to believe a student is in danger. Blue's not in danger. I'm not saying she is, but I wanted to give you a heads up. If anything changes, we'll have to act accordingly. The call ended. I sat in my truck, hands shaking. They were watching me now. The school, CPS, the neighborhood, all because of Mason's lies. I drove to a parking lot and sat there for an hour, trying to calm down. I thought about my options. I could move, pack up and leave. But where would we go? And what would that look like to CPS? Like I was running. I could hire a lawyer, but with what money? I was barely making rent. I could confront Mason again, but that would just give him more ammunition. I was trapped, and I didn't know how to get out. 2 weeks later, it happened. Blue came home shaking. I was in the kitchen, making dinner, when I heard the front door slam. She ran straight to her room and locked the door. "Blue?" I called. No answer. I walked down the hall and knocked. "Blue, what's wrong?" Her voice came out muffled. "Nothing." "Talk to me." Silence. I stood there for a minute, then sat down against the wall outside her door. "I'm right here, kiddo, whenever you're ready." 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, the lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Blue's face was red. Streaks of tears streaked her cheeks. "What happened?" I asked softly. She sat down on the floor next to me. "He talked to me."
That's not. I know. I believe you. But my hands are tied. Corporate wants you on administrative leave until this gets resolved. My heart sank. For how long? I don't know. Could be a week. Could be longer. I can't afford that. I'm sorry, Alex. I really am. But I don't have a choice. I walked out of that office feeling numb. No job, no income, CPS watching, Blue falling apart. I didn't know how much lower I could go. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at Mason's house. The lights were on. I could see him moving around inside, probably on his phone, probably laughing. He'd won. He'd destroyed me without ever throwing a punch. And there was nothing I could do about it. I thought about giving up, about packing our stuff and leaving in the middle of the night, starting over somewhere else. But where would we go? And how would we survive? I was trapped, and Mason knew it. I sat there until the sun came up, trying to figure out what to do next. But I had no answers. 2 streets over, Judge Camilla Harper sat in her home office, scrolling through the neighborhood Facebook group. She didn't usually pay attention to online drama, but something about the recent posts had caught her eye. Concerning behavior from a neighbor. Keep your kids safe. She'd been a family court judge for 20 years. She knew what coded language looked like. She knew when someone was being railroaded. And she'd heard Mason Lark's name before. 3 years ago, a woman had filed a restraining order against Mason, claimed he'd harassed her, followed her, made inappropriate comments. But Mason had money, a good lawyer. The case got dismissed. Judge Harper had always wondered if that woman was telling the truth. Now, reading these posts, her instincts kicked in. She opened her contacts and called a neighbor 2 doors down. "Hey, Linda, you still have that doorbell camera, right?" "Yeah, why?" "Can I ask you a favor?" Linda hesitated. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to check your footage from the past few weeks, specifically anything involving the duplex on Elm Street. The guy everyone's talking about." "Yeah, him." "Camilla, if he's dangerous?" "I don't think he is, but I need to be sure." Linda was quiet for a moment. "All right, give me a day." Judge Harper hung up and made 2 more calls, one to a neighbor across the street, one to another down the block. All of them had doorbell cameras. All of them agreed to share their footage. 2 days later, Judge Harper sat at her desk reviewing the videos. The first clip showed Mason walking up to a young girl at the mailbox. The girl, Blue, stepped back. Mason leaned closer, talking. Blue turned and ran inside. The second clip showed Mason standing on Alexander's porch looking through the window, then walking away and calling someone on his phone. The third clip showed Mason talking to the HOA president, pointing at Alexander's house, his face animated and angry, except the timestamp showed Alexander wasn't even home. Judge Harper leaned back in her chair. Mason had lied about everything. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Hi, this is Judge Harper. I need to speak with someone in CPS about a case, Alexander Gray." A week later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, exhausted, wary. A woman in her 50s stood there, dressed professionally, holding a folder. "Mr. Gray, my name is Camilla Harper. I'm a county judge. I live a few streets over. Can we talk?" My guard went up. About what? About Mason Lark. I stared at her. "I didn't do anything." "I know," she said calmly. "That's why I'm here." She stepped inside and set a tablet on the table. I pulled footage from 3 doorbell cameras in the neighborhood. She pressed play. The first clip showed Mason walking up to Blue at the mailbox, Blue stepping back, Mason leaning closer. My hands clenched. The second clip showed Mason standing on my porch looking through the window, then walking away and making a phone call. The third clip showed Mason talking to the HOA president, pointing at my house, his face animated, except I wasn't even home. I felt my throat tighten. "How did you—" "I've dealt with men like Mason before," Judge Harper said. "They lie, they manipulate, and they count on no one checking the facts." She looked me in the eye. "Mr. Gray, you've been set up, and I'm not going to let this man destroy your family." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. "What do I do?" I asked. "Nothing. Let me handle it." And she did. Judge Harper contacted CPS directly. She provided the footage. She explained the pattern. Within 2 days, I got a call from the caseworker. "Mr. Gray, we've reviewed additional evidence. Your case is closed. You're officially cleared." I nearly dropped the phone. Judge Harper also contacted the HOA. She presented the footage to the board. They reviewed it, realized they'd been played, and issued a formal apology. Mason was served with a restraining order. He was banned from approaching me or Blue. Judge Harper also filed a report with the Texas Real Estate Commission. Mason's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. The admin removed the anonymous posts. People started apologizing, awkwardly, quietly, but they apologized. My landlord called. Alex, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. I've got a better property opening up next month. Quieter neighborhood. It's yours if you want it. My boss called. Come back to work, and I'm promoting you to field supervisor. You've earned it. Within 2 weeks, everything changed. But the weight didn't disappear. 3 months later, Blue and I sat on the porch of our new home. It was smaller, quieter. The neighbors waved. No one stared. Blue was sketching in her notebook, a bird perched on a fence. Cool Front Air Systems had promoted me to field supervisor. I managed a team now. Better pay, better hours. I could actually be home for dinner. Blue had started attending an arts program through a local charity. Judge Harper had connected us. Blue went twice a week, working with other kids who loved to draw. She was smiling again, not all the time, but more than before. The scars were still there, though. She still checked the locks twice before bed. She still tensed when a car door slammed. She still asked, "Are we safe?" more than any kid should have to. And I still carried the weight of what happened, the anger, the helplessness, the fear that it could happen again. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Blue was quiet, lost in her drawing. "Dad," she said softly. "Yeah? Are we safe now?" I looked at her, at the way she still flinched sometimes, at the way she carried herself, stronger but scarred. I pulled her close. "Yeah, kiddo, we're safe, and we're staying that way." She nodded, didn't say anything else, just kept drawing. I stared out at the street. The anger was still there. The weight of what had happened still pressed on my chest. But we'd survived. Mason's real estate license had been revoked. The restraining order was permanent. He'd moved out of the neighborhood. Judge Harper checked in on us every few weeks. "Just making sure you're doing all right," she'd say. We were doing all right. Not perfect, but all right. Blue's teacher called me one day. "Mr. Gray, I just wanted to let you know, Blue submitted a drawing for the school art show. It's beautiful. You should be proud." I went to the art show. Blue's drawing was hanging on the wall. It was a picture of the two of us, standing on a porch, the sun setting behind us. At the bottom, she'd written, "Safe." I stood there for a long time, staring at that word. Safe. We'd fought for it, bled for it, nearly lost everything for it, but we had it now. And I wasn't going to let anyone take it away again. Because sometimes, the quietest fathers carry the loudest battles. Strength isn't how hard you fight. It's how long you protect the people you love. And I wasn't done protecting my daughter. Not ever. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, relief, then do me a favor. Smash that like button and subscribe. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. And drop a comment below. Do you think Alexander handled it the right way? What would you have done differently? I read every single comment. See you in the next one.